All right, so you've got this amazing idea, right? For your business, your team, maybe even a side hustle. And you map it all out, every single step. But then reality hits, and the whole thing just kind of falls apart. Why does that happen so often? Well, that question takes us right to the heart of what we're calling the strategic planning paradox. I mean, it's got to be one of the most frustrating things, right? In business, in life, wherever. We pour all this time and energy into making the perfect plan, and then, bam, it's useless, sometimes literally overnight. So, what are we doing wrong here? And here it is. This is the core of the whole paradox. In a world that's just always changing, being too rigid, too locked into one single idea of the future, that can actually be your biggest weakness. The very thing you created to make you successful ends up being the thing that sets you up to fail. Crazy, right? But hey, that doesn't mean we just throw our hands up and stop planning altogether. Not at all. It just means we've got to get smarter about how we plan. So let's break down 3 really core tools that every single leader needs in their back pocket. Think of this as your strategic toolkit. Okay, first up, we've got participatory planning. The whole idea here is collaboration. So instead of some top-down command, you actually bring the people who are going to be affected by the plan into the process. And look, this isn't just about being nice or making people feel included. It's a strategic move. It creates incredible buy-in. And honestly, you get insights from the front lines that you would never see from way up in the corner office. So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, it can be super simple. Think about a student planning a charity event at Tim Hortons. Instead of just guessing, they surveyed the staff and customers to see what they'd actually get behind. Or, a Shopify store polling its followers on TikTok to pick the next product color. And here's a pro tip I absolutely love. Invite a skeptic, a real doubter, into your planning session. Seriously, the tough questions they ask will make your final plan 1,000 times stronger. All right, next up in our toolkit is benchmarking. Now, this one's a classic for a reason. It's basically the art of looking at the best in the business, your competitors, maybe even leaders in totally different industries, and just asking, what are they doing so well and how can we catch up? It's all about learning from the top players to up your own game. So, for example, a charity might look at its donation totals from last year to set a new goal that's ambitious, but still, realistic. Or think about an e-commerce store. They might measure their website's page speed against their fastest competitor to make sure they're not losing customers. It could even be a student group digging up the best project from last year and using that as their gold standard. The key here is it's focused, it's data-driven, and it's all about improvement. And our third tool, this one is crucial, is scenario planning. This is what you pull out when you're dealing with real uncertainty. So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket and betting on a single future, you imagine several different plausible ones. You ask, okay, what's the best case scenario? What's the absolute worst case? And what's the most likely thing to happen? The goal isn't to be a psychic and predict the future, it's to be ready and flexible no matter what happens. So a business might use this to game out what happens if a key supplier just vanishes overnight, or how big swings in the currency markets could totally change their sales numbers. And for pretty much any project, it all boils down to asking that one critical question. What if plan A is a total disaster? Answering that question, that's how you build real, lasting resilience. Okay, so we've got our 3 tools, right? Participatory planning, benchmarking, and scenario planning. But here's the thing. The real strategy isn't just knowing what these tools are, it's knowing when to use each one. Because trust me, it's not always simple, and every single tool comes with a pretty big trade-off. Let's start with benchmarking. Now, its upside is obvious. It drives efficiency, it helps you make those small, steady improvements. It's awesome for getting better at the game you're already playing. But here's the downside, the hidden danger. It can trap you in a me too mindset. It fosters imitation, not innovation. Benchmarking helps you play the current game better, but it will never help you invent a brand new one. And what about participatory planning? Well, the upside is massive. You get this incredible buy-in because everyone feels like they helped build the plan. It becomes our plan. But the downside, it can be slow, it can be messy, and you run the risk of design by committee, where you end up with a safe, watered-down compromise instead of the bold, game-changing move you really needed. Finally, let's talk scenario planning. On the plus side, it's the ultimate tool for building resilience in a crazy uncertain world. It makes you adaptable. The downside, it's resource intensive. It takes a ton of time and mental energy. And if you're not careful, it's easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis. You get so caught up exploring every possible future that you never actually pull the trigger and make a decision. Okay, so how do these trade-offs actually play out in the real world? Let's look at a classic case study to really bring this to life. It's a true planning showdown: the old guard incumbent versus the scrappy disruptor. In one corner, you've got BCE, or Bell, a huge established telecom giant. Their whole business was built on deliberate top-down planning. And in the other corner, Netflix, a company that basically is the definition of adaptation and reinvention. And this battle, it wasn't just about movies or TV shows. It was a clash between two fundamentally different philosophies of planning. So Bell's strategy was all about winning the game that was already being played. They used deliberate top-down planning, and for a long, long time, it worked incredibly well. And their go-to tool? Benchmarking. They were absolutely laser-focused on their main rivals, Rogers and Telus. And look, that made them a super efficient operator in a stable, predictable market. But then, streaming happened, a true disruption, and their entire planning model just fell apart. You can't benchmark against a future that doesn't exist yet. Their service, Crave, was a perfect example of this. It was a reactionary move, basically them trying to play catch-up in a game that Netflix had already invented. Netflix, though, they were playing a totally different game. Their strategy was never just about winning the current market. It was about creating the next one. So their tools of choice were scenario and participatory planning. They used scenario planning to imagine a future without DVDs, way before anyone else saw it coming. And their famous freedom and responsibility culture, that's just a form of participatory planning, designed to get the best ideas from everywhere in the company. And this is the absolute key takeaway. Netflix's greatest competitive advantage was never its content library. It was its process, its ability to plan, to pivot, and to adapt to whatever came next. And that right there brings us to the biggest lesson of all. It's about shifting our focus from the plan itself to the process of planning. Look, the perfect plan is a myth. It just is. It's a static piece of paper in a world that is anything but static. The real, lasting advantage comes from mastering the process of planning itself. It's about building a team that is amazing at learning, adapting, and pivoting the second that original plan hits a wall. So what's your playbook here? 3 simple things. 1, know your environment. If things are stable, benchmarking is your friend. If it's chaotic and uncertain, you better be using scenario planning. 2, build a better process. Your team's capability for planning, that is your real secret weapon. And 3, lead the planning. Don't just be the one who approves the final plan. Get in there, own the process, ask the tough questions, and guide the conversation. And you need to master this now, because the whole future of planning is changing as we speak. Just think about this for a second. AI is getting to the point where it can automate benchmarking in real time. It can simulate thousands of scenarios in the blink of an eye. So when all the analysis is done by a machine, what's left for us? What becomes the truly human skill in strategic planning? Now that is the question every leader should be asking themselves.